This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is March 21st, and I'm producer Pat. With me is Cristina Roach.
Hey, everyone.
Both Darren and Adam are still in isolation.
We might add that Adam is in isolation with 4 children.
Yes, I think he actually mentions it in his segment. So, as I said last week, doing regular panel shows is proving to be a bit of a challenge, but we do have 3 new segments for you this week. Probably not surprisingly, they are all COVID-19 related. Adam gives us a solo segment about the toilet paper shortage, and Cristina is going to talk about some myth-busting with the World Health Organization. But first, Darren gives us some updates on comments he made about the new coronavirus a couple weeks ago.
Hello, listeners. Happy to be back in Canada, and it seems like I just made it, arriving here March 12th. When I last spoke to you, I recorded a message back on February 23rd, and in that message I made some comments about the coronavirus, or COVID-19. The comments were about seeing many people wearing masks, but I was less worried because it's not as bad as the seasonal flu, the population of people that tend to be affected, and how it is mostly localized to people in China. Well, I think those words are a bit too cavalier and seem ignorant, at least if they're not further nuanced, so I wanted to look at each part. Let's talk about mask wearing first. There seems to be mixed info on this, but unless you are the one who is sick, or you really know what you're doing, masks don't seem to be that effective. I felt that way then, and I still feel that way now. We'll see if new evidence comes to light in the future. Okay, well, what about the population that tends to be affected? By this I mean that it seemed that those who were hardest hit were people in their 70s and 80s, both in terms of requiring more care and the mortality rate. This is still true. As age increases, and especially over 60, it seems severity of symptoms, requirement for hospitalization, and critical care and mortality rate all go up. I think I should have been more reflective on how I could inadvertently harm those groups, even if I was at less risk personally, but it still seems generally true. Okay, I also said it was mostly localized to people in China. Well, that is clearly not true now, but it was mostly true then. There's definitely some logic in having to have contact with an infected person in some way to even be able to catch the virus, and there were few to no cases when I was in those countries. Of course, there could have been asymptomatic carriers, but I still think the risk wasn't that high, especially in New Zealand. And that's where I spent my final 2.5 weeks. So that kind of validates I didn't get it in the greater risk countries of Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Manila, or the flights to get places. And the final one, which will also be the bulk of this segment. I said it is not as bad as the seasonal flu. I think I was saying that the flu kills many people, so we shouldn't care more about COVID-19 than the flu, which is not to say we shouldn't care at all, but I could have been clearer. We at the podcast have repeatedly stressed that people should get the flu shot, and we all get them because it's a serious issue. The flu does serious harm. But I still think I was wrong in what I said. While consistency is important, meaning treating something similar to X the same way you treat X would make sense, there really wasn't enough data to know just how much it was or was not like the flu. Further, even if COVID-19 was a new flu, perhaps it should be treated differently than the flu is now to have different consequences than the flu. Before I examine whether COVID-19 is like the flu, I want to briefly explore what it means to compare any two things. How Darren of me. A popular English idiom to illustrate that two things are different is to say it's like comparing apples and oranges, or even the short form, it's apples and oranges. To which I often want to respond, you mean they're both fruit? They are both round, colorful, have a skin, seeds inside, grow on trees, and they're edible. These things don't seem that different at all. And yet we generally understand what someone means because an apple does not taste like an orange. It's like everyone has agreed to focus on a specific subset of properties or characteristics and ignore the other ones. In many ways, apples are like oranges, but in some ways, they are not. Consequently, when someone says that COVID-19 is like the flu, or that it is not like the flu, we should be careful to understand what comparison they are making. Surely COVID-19 is more like the flu than COVID-19 is like an apple, or COVID-19 is like a bicycle, but those are obviously discounted. Why would you compare that at all? Now, for the broader public, I think the general class of comparison is probably something like infectious virusy thing. So let's compare and contrast. And a general point I want to mention first, which I'll hopefully reiterate throughout, is that there are a lot more data and certainty about the flu and a lot less about COVID-19. Let's start with symptoms. As an article on MarketWatch says, quote, to have almost identical symptoms, fever, coughing, night sweats, aching bones, tiredness, and in more severe cases of both viruses, nausea and even diarrhea. End quote. Now these seem to occur in different degrees, but it seems that a dry cough and a fever are the most common symptoms of COVID-19, and sneezing is almost a counter-indicator. meaning if you are sneezing a lot, it probably isn't COVID-19. But if you have any of these symptoms, please consult the CDC, a reliable healthcare provider, or your doctor. I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. So here, though, we already see nuance is important. When comparing COVID-19 and the flu, it's not enough to discuss fever, but prevalence rates of fever and in comparison to other symptoms. Well, some other similarities. Given they're both viruses, they are not treatable with antibiotics. Those are for bacterial infections. They can both be spread by touching your face, coughing, and sneezing. So you should wash your hands for at least 20 seconds to reduce the spread of germs, and this applies to both viruses. But of course, that's just generally good advice year-round. Well, what about a vaccine? So here's a major difference, that there is a vaccine for the flu, and of course there's not yet one for COVID-19, or rather the disease that causes it. Also, while I have been speaking about the flu, to be fair, there isn't just one flu, but there's several strains, and that's why the vaccines are not 100% effective. But of course, they're still worth getting. They are working on a vaccine for COVID-19, but that is likely months or years away. Okay, Darren. But what people really care about are the transmission rates and the fatality rates. So what are those? All right, well, let's look at transmission. In a Live Science article, again linked in the show notes at trcpodcast.com, great website, R0, which looks like an R0, predicts the number of people who can catch a given bug from a single infected person. Currently, the R0 for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes the disease COVID-19, is estimated at about 2.2, meaning a single infected person will infect about 2.2 others, on average. By comparison, the flu has an R0 of 1.3. End quote. Now, things to note is that the number is not consistent across populations, and others estimated between 2 and 3, and yet others say we don't really know at all. So, to provide some indication of the situation, the following is from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, website. Question is, when is someone infectious? And here is their answer. The onset and duration of viral shedding and period of infectiousness for COVID-19 are not yet known. It is possible that SARS-CoV-2 RNA may be detectable in the upper and lower respiratory tract for weeks after illness onset, similar to infection with MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV. However, detection of viral RNA does not necessarily mean that infectious virus is present. Asymptomatic infection with SARS-CoV-2 has been reported, but it is not yet known what role asymptomatic infection plays in transmission. Similarly, the role of pre-symptomatic transmission, which is infection detection during the incubation period prior to illness onset, is unknown. Existing literature regarding SARS-CoV-2 and other coronaviruses suggests that the incubation period may range from 2 to 14 days. So that's a lot of unknowns. All right, moving on to the fatality rate, and this is a quote from MarketWatch. There are reported to be some 1 billion influenza infections worldwide each year, with up to 45 million cases in the US per year, tens of thousands of US deaths, and 291,000 to 646,000 deaths worldwide. The seasonal flu has a fatality rate of less than 1%. Anthony Fauci, director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases on Capitol Hill, estimates the fatality rate of the flu is closer to 0.1%. Okay, what about COVID-19? Again, uncertainty abounds. Now, the MarketWatch piece also quotes World Health Organization director from earlier in March saying it's about 3.4%. But it also mentions a recent paper from the Journal of the American Medical Association, which indicated a fatality rate of 2.3%. Other sources say it's around 3%. Of course, this is highly dependent on age and condition. If you're under 30, it is far less than 1%, and if you're over 80, it seems closer to 15%. Similar to the flu, it won't hit all ages equally. Now, as of this particular writing and recording, March 17th, there are about 200,000 cases and 8,000 deaths worldwide, which gives you about a 4% number. Also, just as I was preparing this segment, John Ioannidis put out an opinion piece saying that we don't really have reliable data on this virus at all. Why should we listen to this guy? Well, Ioannidis is a professor of medicine, of epidemiology and population health, of biomedical data science, and of statistics at Stanford University, and co-director of Stanford's Meta Research Innovation Center. And I've talked about him before in the podcast regarding stats and the replication crisis in medicine. He's generally thought to be a brilliant and skeptically minded person. That does not mean he's right, but I'll share some of what he wrote in these next 4 paragraphs, all of which are direct quotations. The data collected so far on how many people are infected and how the epidemic is evolving are utterly unreliable. Given the limited testing to date, some deaths, and probably the vast majority of infections due to SARS-CoV-2 are being missed. We don't know if we are failing to capture infections by a factor of 3 or 300. 3 months after the outbreak emerged, most countries, including the United States, lack the ability to test a large number of people, and no countries have reliable data on the prevalence of the virus in a representative random sample of the general population. This evidence fiasco creates tremendous uncertainty about the risk of dying from COVID-19. Reported case fatality rates, like the official 3.4% rate from the World Health Organization, He says they cause horror and are meaningless. Patients who have been tested for SARS-CoV-2 are disproportionately those with severe symptoms and bad outcomes. As most health systems have limited testing capacity, selection bias may be even worse in the near future. The one situation where an entire closed population was tested was the Diamond Princess cruise ship and its quarantined passengers. The case fatality rate there was about 1%, but this was a largely elderly population, in which the death rate from COVID-19 is much higher. Projecting the Diamond Princess mortality rate onto the age structure of the U.S. population, the death rate among people infected with COVID-19 would be 0.125%. But since this estimate is based on extremely thin data, there were just 7 deaths among the 700 infected passengers and crew, the real death rate could stretch from 5 times lower, 0.025%, to 5 times higher, 0.625%. It is also possible that some of the passengers who were infected might die later, and that tourists might have different frequencies of chronic disease, a risk factor for worse outcomes with SARS-CoV-2 infection than the general population. Adding these extra sources of uncertainty, reasonable estimates for the case fatality ratio in the general U.S. population vary from 0.05% to 1%. End quote. If that is the case, the fatality rate of COVID-19 is similar to or less than the flu. And with that in mind, Ioannidis calls into question the large-scale lockdown efforts that have been put in place. Is the cost worth the benefit? Now, of course, that could be its own segment, and maybe it will be in the future. So, is this apple actually an orange? Well, I would say we don't know. We currently think that the symptoms are similar in type between flu and COVID-19, but perhaps not in prevalence or degree. There's a vaccine for the flu, but not for COVID-19. That the transmission rate for COVID-19 is higher than that of the flu at the moment, in terms of what we believe, and the fatality rate is higher or similar or lower than that of the flu. What do we do with this? Well, I think instead of saying COVID-19 is or is not like the flu, I think we should discuss the ways in which it is or is not similar to the flu, and I hope to have done that today. We simply won't know sufficient details for weeks, if not months. Until next time, think better to act better.
Thanks, Darren. Now, Cristina, the WHO is doing some myth-busting?
Indeed. They're doing a lot of myth-busting. A couple of nights ago, I saw a post being shared from the World Health Organization on Twitter with some good old-fashioned myth-busting. Reading through them, I couldn't help but think, how could anyone possibly believe some of the quote-unquote more common myths they cite? I wondered if I would just be preaching to the choir, covering them for you guys. Even Pat made a comment about preaching to the choir to me. Then, a family member messaged us, shaking her head after being sent a ridiculous post promoting a coronavirus cure. That's when I realized we all have loved ones that play fast and loose with facts, and since we are literally dealing with a situation where facts could save you and your loved ones' lives, I decided it would be great to share some as a PSA and also hopefully arm you with valuable info in dealing with your FAMs.
Awesome.
It should go without saying the situation with COVID-19 is fluid and worldwide updates are coming at us by the minute. So please always check trusted sources to corroborate any information you hear.
Before you move on, that's a point I actually want to make, and probably Darren and Adam made it during their segments as well, but we're doing some coverage of COVID-19, but things are changing so fast. And I know that we had someone post to a Reddit thread about a show that we did a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of people chimed in that the data was old. Of course, it's point in time, right? Yeah, it's point in time.
All right, here we go. So the WHO posted a series of graphics highlighting some of what they deemed to be the more common misconceptions surrounding COVID-19. Do I add the joke so that we won't get fooled again? Now, these examples are directly from a page on their website titled Coronavirus Disease COVID-19 Advice for the Public, Mythbusters. I'm going to kick off with one of the more ubiquitous myths, and no one will judge you for believing this because it was consistently part of the messaging in media. It's especially important to get this message out there after I saw footage of college spring breakers partying in Florida like it's 1999, claiming they don't care if they get the coronavirus. Does the new coronavirus specifically affect the elderly, or are younger people also susceptible? Yes, in caps, younger people are susceptible. Any human in any age group can be infected by the new coronavirus. We are not only seeing elderly people become severely ill, but people with pre-existing medical conditions, including asthma and diabetes, are more vulnerable. All people of all ages need to take steps to protect themselves from the virus. The new coronavirus can't be transmitted in areas with hot and humid climates, can it? This is false, no matter who says it. All evidence so far shows the virus can be transmitted in any area that experiences hot and humid weather. They can't reiterate enough. The best way to protect yourself and others is by washing your hands, and they say this at the end of each Mythbusting graphic. Next, cold weather and snow can kill the new coronavirus. Nope. As the post says, there is no reason to believe that cold weather can kill the new coronavirus or other diseases. The normal human body temperature remains around 36.5 to 37 degrees Celsius, regardless of the external temperature or weather. This one was new to me. Does taking a hot bath prevent the new coronavirus disease? Again, the normal body temperature remains around 36.5 to 37 degrees Celsius, regardless of the temperature of your bath. Can the new coronavirus be transmitted through mosquito bites? Hadn't heard this one either. Had you heard this one?
No, it doesn't make very much sense to me, but I hadn't heard it.
There is no evidence to suggest anything of the sort. As the WHO succinctly explains, quote, the new coronavirus is a respiratory virus which spreads primarily through droplets generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or through droplets of saliva or discharge from the nose. Next, are hand dryers effective in killing the new coronavirus? How? Come on. The answer is no. Let's move on. This one is interesting. How effective are thermal scanners in detecting people infected with the new coronavirus? What do you think, Pat?
Well, they're using them, so there has to be something to it, you would think.
Well, if you have a fever, then yes.
Yeah.
Thermal scanners can technically be effective in identifying someone with a fever, but they can't detect whether someone is infected. And a reminder, it takes between 2 to 10 days for people to get sick and develop a fever.
But a fever is an indication of infection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can spraying alcohol or chlorine all over your body kill the new coronavirus? No. Even though alcohol and chlorine may be useful to disinfect surfaces, spraying alcohol or chlorine all over your body will not kill viruses that have already entered your body. If you think about it that way, you'll always remember this to not be true. Not to mention, this stuff can be really harmful to your skin, to mucous membranes like your eyes and mouth. So no, please don't do that. Can eating garlic help prevent infection with the new coronavirus? Because garlic is known to have some antimicrobial properties, I swear it comes up as a potential cure for everything. There's no evidence that eating garlic will protect you from the new coronavirus. All you Nonas and Omas out there, I hope you're listening to me. I'm going to lump these next three together because they're kind of related. Do vaccines against pneumonia protect you against the new coronavirus? Are antibiotics effective in preventing and treating the new coronavirus? Are there any specific medicines to prevent or treat the new coronavirus? In short, no. In the case of pneumonia, these vaccines could be recommended for people with existing respiratory illnesses to protect them. But vaccines used against pneumonia do not protect against COVID-19. As for antibiotics, if you have a bacterial co-infection, you may be prescribed antibiotics. But to be clear, antibiotics fight bacterial infections and do not work against viruses. And as for whether there is anything to prevent or treat COVID-19, the answer is unfortunately no. I'm seeing a lot of BS out there, and I wish people would just stop for 1 second and think about what they are sharing. If there was something out there proven to help prevent or treat this virus, don't you think healthcare workers would be using it? This really makes me angry because there's so many people on the front lines who are going to die because of people spreading misinformation like this. Now, all healthcare workers can do right now is help relieve or treat the symptoms of this virus. We've learned some specific treatments are under investigation and will be tested through clinical trials. As the WHO states, there are treatments being tested and they are helping to accelerate research and development efforts with a range of partners. So more to come. Lastly, can an ultraviolet disinfection lamp kill the new coronavirus? Now, Pat, we've known labs have used UV lamps Forever, they're used to purify water, etc. So this one's a little more complicated than a simple yes or no. I linked to a BBC article in our show notes about new technology in the form of autonomous robots called UVD robots that can be used in hospitals to kill microbes with a zap of ultraviolet light. Now, UVD Robots VP Simon Allison says truckloads of these robots have been shipped to China, particularly in Wuhan, with Asia and Europe sales also up right now. So how does it work? Using 8 bulbs that emit concentrated UVC ultraviolet light, the machine acts like a kind of Roomba, for lack of a better word, and goes around a room and helps destroy harmful microbes by damaging their DNA and RNA, so they can't multiply. Professor Hans Jorn Kolmos, a professor of clinical microbiology at the University of Southern Denmark, helped to develop the robot. And he says if you apply a proper dose of ultraviolet light in a proper period of time, then you can be pretty sure that you can get rid of your organism. This type of disinfection can also be applied to epidemic situations like the one we experience right now with coronavirus disease. Okay, so if you're thinking, problem solved, not so fast. Dr. Lena Sirak, an expert on molecular biology and associate prof at University College London, agrees that UV disinfection robots can help fight coronavirus, but that they are no silver bullet. As she says, these machines provide an extra line of defense. So here's the deal, guys. In order for UV to be effective, it needs to hit a surface directly. So a manual cleaning is still needed first to make sure the light waves are not blocked by dirt or any obstacles. Now, not to mention, this process is dangerous to humans. BBC writer Adrian Murray mentions having to wait outside the room while they demoed the robot doing its thing and claimed there's a smell like burned hair in the room afterwards. The bottom line is the WHO states, UV lamps should not be used to sterilize hands or other areas of skin as UV radiation can cause skin irritation. So let me end with this. If you haven't heard it a bazillion times by now, the best way to protect yourself against COVID-19 is by frequently washing your hands for 20 seconds. I personally recommend belting out the chorus of one of your favorite songs while you do it. My current hand-washing ditty is the chorus for Mr. Brightside by the Killers. It's perfect. It's like 25 seconds. I would love to hear if you guys have a hand-washing sing-along, so please share on our socials, website comments, or email us at info@trcpodcast.com.
Thanks, Cristina. So we'll leave you with Adam talking about the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. We hope that people are staying safe and healthy out there, and we'll continue to try and bring you shows. As I said last week, it has been a bit of a challenge, but we'll continue to do our best.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
Talk to you soon, everyone.
What's up, cuboids? Before we get started, I wanted to give a bit of an update of how things are going for me here. I think everyone's kind of got some sort of special circumstances going on thanks to this health crisis that we're facing. Basically, I've been told to work from home. I've been doing so for 2 days. It's Tuesday. It's the second day we're doing this. I got 2 kids home from school. I got 2 other kids, a 1 and a 3-year-old, home from daycare. So needless to say, I'm not getting a full 8 hours of work done. I was on a conference call today, and while I was leading it and speaking, I changed a diaper and gave a baby a bottle. So these are certainly interesting times, and I think things are going to change a lot more in the coming weeks. And obviously, by the time you even hear this, things will have changed drastically. So stay safe, stay healthy, everybody. So if you've been paying any attention lately, you'll know 2 things. This coronavirus disease 2019 thing is a big deal, and people are hoarding toilet paper. While we could probably talk about COVID-19 for shows and shows, I wanted to talk about the TP. It's a time of crisis, and people are preparing for long periods of isolation. So what are they hoarding? Non-perishable canned and dry foods? Water? Guns? The big one seems to be toilet paper. I first heard about this as COVID-19 was becoming a more looming threat here in Canada. Last week, and this would have been Tuesday, March 10th, Mario Day, I made a trip to Walmart to make sure I had a good reserve of certain items. Mainly, I wanted to make sure I had enough diapers and wipes to last me a few weeks in case I wouldn't be able to make it to the store. While there, I made sure to grab some toilet paper. I'd heard that people in the US at this point were stockpiling toilet paper. Certain store shelves were completely picked clean from some photos and video I saw. As stores opened or shelves were replenished, crowds flocked to the toilet paper aisle and emptied them. I myself picked up a 30-roll pack. I was worried I might not have another chance to do so in a while. I understood that the current rush on toilet paper was fundamentally irrational, but I did believe I was rationally justified in picking up a comfortable supply of TP. Now, how can I reconcile these ideas? Well, it's fairly simple. If I believe that others are hoarding toilet paper, then I should myself make an effort to get some before others hoard so much of it that there's none left for me. My own impulse to buy toilet paper therefore adds to the toilet paper shortage. Anyone else who, like me, attempts to preempt the toilet paper shortage themselves contributes to the very shortage that they're trying to avoid. Most of the people involved in this process are just sort of feeding the hype, and there is some rationality behind their actions. So try to think yourself as being better than the toilet paper hoarders, and you might find that you are unable to find any when you actually need it. In the current era, where news spreads across the globe in moments, a shortage can similarly spread quite quickly. Only a few days after picking my 30-pack of toilet paper, I haven't seen any in stores since. To be fair, I haven't been spending much time shopping since then. I've made exactly one trip to the grocery store and one trip to the pharmacy since, but no toilet paper. I found an interesting comparison on Twitter a while later, which compared this toilet paper situation to a bank run, and I thought this comparison was apt. A bank run or a run on the bank is when the clients of a bank withdraw their money because they're afraid that they won't be able to do so in the future. This may start as something fundamentally irrational, but if enough people do it, then it could be a problem, meaning customers were actually justified in taking their money out before the bank became destabilized and potentially went bankrupt. Now, banks don't actually have equivalent amounts of money to what's in all the customers' accounts as cash. This usually works fine, given a predictable amount of people want to withdraw some or all of their funds at any given time. But if a bank run occurs, the bank is unable to satisfy all of those requests, leading to the very problem that people were worried would happen. This sort of scene is illustrated in the classic film, It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey runs Bailey Building and Loan. This isn't anything close to a bank as we would know it today, but this existed back in the day. A savings and loans takes cash deposits from customers and lends money to borrowers. As Jimmy Stewart says in the film, and you'll forgive me for not doing the accent, you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in the safe. The money's not here. The money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Miss Macklin's house, and 100 others. Why, you're lending them the money to build. Give us 60 days. Now, modern banks don't quite work the same way, so the movie is a bit dated because of this. So Twitter user @JustinWolfers suggests, and I can only assume somewhat jokingly, that we should treat toilet paper like money and that the US needs to have a strategic toilet paper reserve. This would be a huge stockpile of toilet paper, guaranteeing that all Americans could get some minimum amount, say 2 rolls a week, from the government's stockpile. Then basically, people have no incentive to hoard toilet paper because you have a guarantee that you could get it. Now, there's a problem with this. There are a few problems with this. But one of the problems is that toilet paper is not as indispensable as money. You can wipe or clean your bunghole, as Beavis would put it, in a number of other ways. I personally have a septic system, so while something like Kleenex or a wipe would do the job quite well, I can't flush them. But having a few dirty Kleenexes in a small garbage bag is certainly an option, better than completely going without. People can always wash with a bidet or even a shower if worse comes to worse, or you can just wipe with a cloth and then clean it. It's a little gross, but it's not the same as just not having money or not having food. So lacking toilet paper is simply an inconvenience compared to some other things. If you don't have enough money, you can't buy things like toilet paper. Further, having a toilet paper reserve sort of solves the fact that people are currently having a run on toilet paper, but people could make a run on any specific good, so you can't really expect the government to have a reserve of every potential product that any person could potentially try to hoard. I don't think that's particularly realistic. So why were people going after toilet paper anyway? Now, I tried to find the specific origin of this one, but I couldn't track it down to any one thing. A coworker had mentioned that there were concerns that the toilet paper was made in China and that there could be a supply problem. Now, it may be true that people thought of this, but that doesn't really make much sense since most toilet paper here in Canada and in the US is made domestically. So like I said, someone could have incorrectly believed this, which could have sparked the whole thing, but I couldn't really find some strong evidence of that either. Ultimately, there's really more than enough toilet paper as it gets regularly replenished on store shelves. While the demand lately has been high due to a sort of spike in demand, stocks keep coming in. Soon enough, people will feel content that they have enough at home and stop buying it, and then stores will start having enough stock to stop the madness. Now, this is not the first time we've seen a toilet paper shortage. Back in 1973, late-night TV show host Johnny Carson read a humorous article about concerns that there would be a toilet paper shortage. This was at a time where there were many shortages in the US, so viewers were concerned. They didn't want to run out of toilet paper. Worried that there would be a shortage, they bought a bunch of toilet paper. This caused some stores to run out, and then more people started to worry, and a similar sort of toilet paper drought began to occur. Stores were setting limits on the number of rolls people could buy. Stock was low for 4 months. While I hope this gets resolved soon, if the 70s are any indication, we could have problems with the supply of toilet paper for months because of this. But toilet paper wasn't the only thing in short supply last week. A lot of grocery stores around here have been running out of some food. So last Thursday, that's March 12th, I visited my local grocery store here in Chelsea, and most things were well stocked, though there were larger than normal crowds. I, just like others, was building up my supply for the coming days and weeks of uncertainty. I didn't know when the next time I would be able to get to a store. I didn't know if I would need to be quarantined or what would happen. Now, just 2 days later on the Saturday, things in the news had progressed and people were more concerned. My wife sent me photos of a vegetable and a pasta aisle, which were picked completely clean, as empty as the Costco toilet paper aisles. The common items which get taken first when there are storms in the US are milk and bread. Again, since people worry they won't get enough, they buy more of these items, and then there's always a shortage. But these are perishable goods, and many alternatives aren't really in short supply, so it's kind of an odd thing to see disappearing. As food and toilet paper grow scarce in stores here, I've seen no shortage of milk or bread. It just goes to show that these particular buying habits is really a cultural thing. There's something in the US where people have learned that when there's going to be a storm, they need to get the bread and the milk, and because people do it, they do need to get bread and milk before other people get it first. So it's really this odd psychological thing, this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, similar to kind of what's been going on with the toilet paper. So there absolutely is a toilet paper shortage. It won't likely last too long, but it is a real thing caused by an escalating series of people hoarding toilet paper because other people like them are doing the exact same thing. To tell people they are wrong or irrational to do so isn't really justified when the truth is that people will actually have a hard time getting toilet paper. If everyone only takes what they need, we will of course be fine, but if I expect others will take more, then I should take more myself just in case I can't find any the next time I go to the store. Hopefully this all settles down soon, but until then, don't panic. There are definitely other ways to keep clean. Peace out, cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.